Going through essential line net correlations and track interference. It's modification lines of track interference. If I give you a sheet of paper and you don't understand what it is, it's because it's too complicated. So for you to understand space and time in you, it's got to be simple and easy to handle, to understand what's going on with you. It's the inner understanding locations, right? So I give you something in position so you understand how to use it through unification, and it's all done through the inner child. That's all this is. It's you getting into the balance of you to all levels and how you see yourself, into the authenticity of you, the authentic of you, the position, location, line calculating lines of you, because you're never separated from yourself. And when you come back to inseparable, it doesn't matter where you go, you come back to center being in the yang. Okay. So to get you guys to understand the unification of the game that you're in is understand you're the inner child that basically plays the game, understands the instructions and understands the game levels, and understand how to control the thoughts, the actions, and emotions of the players that you bring in the game level. Okay? So every time you're doing schematics of drawing, that's the game level that you're doing. Right? So it's a sight lines, a track lines, a high interference, that position location puts the inner child in location system. So it's about you coming back to yourself. The inner child is the mind of self. So what that is that once you guys basically get in friendship, relation, and partnerships with the actual inner child, you will come together, and then you understand how to get into collaboration and a partnership with yourselves, and then you're inseparable. And then you understand the flowing recognition of space and time, which is just the existence of everything and nothing, but there's no in between. See, getting in control of that is understanding the directions and the high correlation setting to redirect this. It's all lines of modification, how to use yourself through unification. Now use the inner child to basically get into that partnership with its vessel. Okay, the inner child itself is just tomorrow. It's the mind itself. It's never here, but it's always here, right? You never see tomorrow because it's always here. It never comes because it's always here. So you always get in justifications. The most important thing is to not allow yourself to separate yourself from your mind, from your brain, from your heart, from your soul, and from your body, guys. So to put you in an actual game itself is much easier through instructions. Instead of understanding what it isn't, is understand what it really is. It simplifies everything, and it puts everything of a handler in position of use and how to see yourself into your own calculated lines of your quantum cells of your CPU. And understand how to use it through the general settings in all lines of high correlation setting that calculates the high quartile interference, that catapults location setting, that energizes your system locations or teleportation. Knowing how to use that through the general settings gets you all levels of geological, geographical, and geometric design and position of travels. Okay? All right, so that simplifies everything, doesn't it? You just have to be in a game so you understand it all through line calculation setting. You use it as the inner child. As the inner child's drawing the schematics, okay, you come together as one. Not two, not three, not four, not five, one, right? So in that lines of all communication setting, you're in direct line signals, and you're just in modifications of yourself now. You're dealing with yourself, so you just expand into the mind, right? There's no inseparable of anything, okay? When it comes to the yin and yang, it's like the subparticle, the subtronic particle, line condition system, the hat-track location system. They go wherever they want, but they always come back together. Okay, that's yin and yang. Okay, in lines of communication system, I'm going to show you how this is all done. You guys have a test. All right, we also have Q&A, resist line travels. Questions or comments, leave in position and calculations, not on cycle, not in system. You just listen, especially if you're activated, right? Team line sequence is already in their telepathy. Okay, so I don't need you. Hey, wow, this is exciting. Hey, how's it going, Gingy? Hey, how's it going, Unison? Hey, how's it going, Gypsy? No, that's interruption. That's interference. Let's go back. So you're here just to listen inside the game levels that you're in, interactions. Understand that pre-flight and line communications. Questions or comments are in Q&A. Okay, copy that? Good. Over now. Directing signals. Now we get into modification lines. Let's get clock line communications and clock line calculations, screen lines, adaptations. All right, so there's two lines of correlation sending calculation lines and projection. Let's get line signals, modification lines, or correlations that travel. Okay, directing lines of signals. Okay, getting that lines of communication. Let's go into two clockings. All right, here's two clocking locations, right? Center correlations and position of three correlations in traction, right? Now, this is lines and position of units, and this position location lines is the team and track locations. Now, direct lines of MI lines, high center interference in track location lines of 3 and lines of 6 and over 9 in position of 12 in calculations of direct signals. Split lines of anomaly, mine lines of 3, keep doing what they're through calculation line the game levels are in. 6 lines of track lines and 9 lines of 12. It sets lines of 3 track location of provision. Okay? So clocking lines of centers, the units, when they get activated, they have to understand how to go through the 12 central lines of pi in track locations. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 set correlations, right? Getting that lines that puts them in tractions, right? They start with that. Now they're in no time and no space. That puts them in the past, that puts them in the present, and that puts them in the future in traction. Direct lines of high center interference. Now the team is lines of core track interference into general settings in position lines of G, G, G. Geological, geographical, and geometric calculation setting of travel. Direct lines modification lines. Now lines of high center interference. So their past, present, and future is in one cycle and one center of one system. Okay? So this gets tricky now because now they have a correlation lines of 3 track lines of 4 or 4 lines of 3. Set correlation lines in the male cycle or female cycle. 3 lines of 4 or 4 lines of 3. That puts lines of 7. So now they're dealing with the team lines equals lines of 7. So correlation lines and high interference of units are working with lines of 3 at track location. That's where it is. It's the MI3 that tracks its system. Anything at 6 line center line position 9 and 12 location is flux capacitor. See? Done through equation, right? Direct lines of signals modify lines of core track interference like a baseball diamond for track location and provision. Okay? So get in that communication, they come out line settings. They're no longer in a 12 lines of pi. They're in a 24 lines of pi. Okay, the only difference now, the past, present, and future is the center operation of them in real-time sequence and track location, all right? So they can go from here, here, and here in line communications. See the difference from this to this? Higher level settings from GOD, right? Metric meters of scales in track location with system, all through calculations, right? So unification lines in units, unification lines of core track interference of the team of 6 lines and 9 lines of 12, okay? That's the difference in core track interference and track location system, how to use the geometric lines and correlation setting in its general settings, okay, to geological, geographical, and geometric system, okay, and all through travel. Okay, so we'll start lines of calculation, screen lines adaptation system. Now, constant correlation lines of grounds in position lines of 2 track locations, right? Clocking centers of 1, clocking centers of 2, okay? So get in that line position location line calculation setting is the past, the present, and the future through dial. Arrow indicate line calculation lines at high center interference, echo chambers, core track interference line directions. Pi generation lines of 4 and position lines of travel. Direct lines of 1 cycle, 1 system, 1 line rotation, surface, and traction. Sets lines of communication lines in position location of center. Process line circulatory line communication lines of position. Process line calculation lines in line communication setting and travel. Okay? So this is what you have to understand. Again, this is the units. They have to go through the 12 central lines of pi in 1 point center. The position lines of track calculation line screens 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 set correlations, right? That's the difference between the units and position of the team. Okay? So the team high rise is line center and high interference. The geological system is a geotherium now. In track location lines of provision, lines of clocking. Okay? That's the difference between 2 through pi, right? Okay? So coming into the expansion is really understand how to get into that line calculation setting. So this is how we change position line tractions. All right, so we'll go through box, right? So now you provision lines of 3 cycles. This is perspective, right? Perspective of 3 cycles, right? In a 4-track provision, okay? That's how it's set up now. Okay, that's what the team's working with now, okay? Setting business on the track lines, this is the units. This is what they're dealing with now in 1 set correlations. They're dealing with 1, you're dealing with 3, okay? So what you have to understand, the direct signals, they can stay in modification lines of box frames or X frames of track location, the direct signals, right? But they can't go through outline communications until they understand the inner cycles of their system. The position of the team can outline their signals and line communicate to a position. They can go outline correlation, setting of travels, and direct signals and modification. Direct calculation lines, downshift, cross line calculation to its setting. Team, units. Okay? This is units, lines of core track interference line, and acceleration lines, the ones that come into the game line communication through activation lines. They stay within the cycle, intersect correlation setting calculation lines, the clocking system through pi generation lines of 12. Set position 24, 24, 24, and 24 line communication setting into data files and line rotation surface interaction. Okay, so in that line calculation setting, process lines at 3 track locations now, right? Direct lines at 3 and line rotations, outlines, and communication lines at calculation, screen lines, adaptation. Process calculation lines at 1, 2, and 3 track locations. Direct lines at 1, 2, and 3 track locations. The settings. Process calculation lines at setting line, operation line, circuits, operation communication line, circuitry line, communication lines, position of program, and communication line screens, and adaptations lines of surface. Okay? This is what the team's dealing with. This is what the units are dealing with. All right? Outlining communication lines at inner spectrum puts all correlation setting to track lines, communication setting, and line rotation surface and geological setting to travel. Okay? Understand the direct signal location system and all communications at MI3. Line communication location lines at 6, 9, and 12 track locations, right? They're coming into their flux capacitor. You guys are already in lines of calculation your flux capacitor of 6, 9, and 12 in track locations. Sending lines of communication lines, geometric lines of core track interference, and high direct location to the system. All right, so this is how you change the geometric, geological, and the geographical system and position location of box center. Okay, so we start with that position, right? Okay, so you have position lines are here, 4 settings, right? 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Sets lines of 1, 2, 3, and 4 set locations, right? Sets lines of travel, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a binary. Okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4 equals 7. You see the 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, and position, right? But the 3 is here in the center now, past, present, and future. And that's what the team's dealing with now, right? They're dealing with this now, right away, 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, okay? So now they can direct their signals of their past, present, and their future in position of one center of one operation cycle. They can center lines their communication system through all modulation of graphs, expand their horizon line calculation setting, overline their communication system per process. They can add flux capacitors, outline communication setting in spectrum, setting communication lines direct signals in a flux capacitor and ground setting in position to its operation. Okay, or they can expand flux capacitor outline panels and line position of 2-point lines of graphs into 4-track line provision locations of docking in track location. Okay, this is what the team can do after tomorrow line screen, right? So they come out of the game of the modulations and settings. Okay, congratulations that team, because you're going to leave the 144 platform. Your position lines and track lines is going to be direct line signals in case to its system now. Process calculation lines of 1, 2, and 3 set correlations. Position lines of 4 track location lines and a 3-line rotation surface and track location. Now, directing lines, you come into the grounds, into 3 centers, and cross lines of 3-line rotation cycles and traction. Now, it gets really interesting now because you're going to be in platforms of 244 and track location. Okay? Symbolism line calculation lines takes the lines of 7 and 12 line position of 24. Sets core tracking interference in a 48 wing framing, direct lines at a 72 computer framing in 144 platform. Your ground line's core center interference is going to be locked in signal at 244 now, and that track line's communication setting, because you're coming into your own modulations of self-modifications and co-correlations travels and direct lines and compilation line screen lanes compliance and defaults line communication and imprints over correlation lines tracking line connection setting to its general settings through geological, geographical, and geometric system and travel communications, all through equation, right? Working in signals and line communication line signals is knowing exactly how to shift lines of anomaly in box location settings in a 4-track provision into a 3-cycle. See? 4 lines of 3, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. But they're always going to have the center lines of the past, present, and future now in center operation. So they can outline signals and cross-line communications now in their own modulation screen. They can go through point lines of graphs now because they're no longer in a game line of setting and modulation. They create their own lines anomaly, but their film strip's already set up and designed through current events of agenda. So it's calculation modify in your film strips of design lines and track interference. Platforms of 1, 1, 2, 3, there's a film strip. Platforms of 3 in position lines of 4-track location, there's another film strip and traction. Set a core track interference of another film strip that crosses reference lines in 1, 2, and 3 track locations. And direct line signals in cross line over cross location setting to a film strip that comes in chronological order in current events location of its agenda. That's how it's set up now, guys. You're going to see the agenda of you, okay, which is no longer in the game, okay? So getting into the modulation line, everything that you see in remote now is going to be in a window frame and track location as data. That's the window frame you're going to see now. Now, process lines is a security line defense lines of communication system. It opens all lines of box lines in your frames and data formation lines and data line communication setting to its towers of communications. Process calculation line to data files, data lines, communication lines of processing, communication setting, all levels of view through operation lines of cycle. Track lines, communication lines of highest interference. Your film strip is always going to be in the center of operation lines of calculate the lines, but it's all levels of view in existence and calculation. That's how it's going to be set up, 6 a.m. tomorrow morning at 2:44, right? So you're coming into the actual projection of you now in track location, and all calculated modified through projection. Okay, that's how it's going to be set up, right? It's pretty interesting as you look at it, right? You see their track location to a system. All right, directing lines of all communication setting. Let's go through 4 square roots and travel. You see it in this way, right? Look at this. See, it's amazing. See it on a 4-line communication, right? Look at that. And I turn it. Look at that. See? Then you can actually see the position of its intelligence of the frame lines of calculation of its face. See? Powerful stuff, isn't it? See, the only difference is you're in your own modification of your own game. That is its current events. So everything that you wake up to in lines of remote, you're going to see things happen now in future line. So you have to be very cautious, keep yourself in observation, quiet the mind, calm the soul, because your current events is now past, present, future that puts all communication of existence in 3 set correlations. Film strip line, graph lines of 1, 2, and 3, and 4 settings. Track location lines of 1, 2, 3, and 4 settings of travel. Direct lines of the film strip. This is the center core system that calculates lines of its parallel. Direct calculus lines, cross line reference of 1, 2, and 3, and 4 settings of 5 set correlation lines attractions. Direct lines modification, open windows, and line direct signals. So the more you surrender, the more you see the current events of you. Setting lines, security line defense. Data files come in track calculation lines. Each box location comes in calculation lines of its data formation screen lines adaptation to its system. Okay, process lines of 1. Inventory lines, inventory line screen, inventory correlation setting of travels. Matrix graph, correlation lines, picture correlation graph, graph calculation screen lines, adaptation lines of data files, and track location. Okay, so this is where it comes into the distributors. So the XE1000s come in and travel. Okay, you've got 2 lines of revision. Okay, so as your film strip comes in line calculation, this is the film strip of you now, not the game of you, right? So process lines of 1 picks up the data, process lines of 2 picks up the data, right? Now, once it picks up its data and process line calculation setting, it goes through a line connection setting to its correlation setting track location to its system, all through its pyramids. Pyramid line coordinate lines the astral projection, astral travels, astral connection, highest interference at platforms in line rotation surface in its flywheel track locations of balance. Balance lines of communication lines of platform and communication lines of data files that process the communication system in its film strip that's set up in your track location setting in your future events. Sets core track interference, line direct signals, data file core track interference, high direct communication lines, 4 cross line signals in process line communication setting. 4 lines of communication lines of waving cycles, lines of energetic line graph communicates to its system and travel. So it's very complicated stuff, guys, okay? Okay, so you're going to be no longer a modulation lines of a game anymore. Your correlation setting is going to be the game of you in current events, agenda and position lines of travel and point lines of graph communication system. So understanding through a line setting. Let's go through graph calculation line screen. Country communication lines of setting, right? So process line, 3 line cycles, okay, in position. You're always going to be in that cycle now. So you can offline communication. So you can look at the line script, and basically you go in this position into this position and point lines of graph. You can reshape the anomalies into its graph calculation lines as country screen lines adaptation. Process line, change the graph set lines of screen, and the 3 triangulation lines of 4 or 5 set correlation lines of travel. Direct lines, you can shape the anomalies and change the shape of its setting in position to its core track interference of its time zone. Set core track interference into 1 into 4 box location of 3 triangulation. Direct lines modification, cross line signals, line communications, online rotation surface, and data files, process communication lines, direct signals through calculation. Okay. So you can reshape position lines at all triangulation, right? So in that position here, you're always working with the 3 cycles. This is the film strip that you see in provision lines at current events that comes in future line, right? Then it has a data formation line screen that opens up higher levels of windows and track location to its system through grounds. Ground centers operation lines of surface opens all correlation lines into catapult. The travel line rotation sets the data files and track location system in power. Direct lines of power lines of screen lines, adaptation lines of surface and track location. Crossing signals in 1, 3, and 4 track location of provision. Now can modify in ground lines of 1, in power lines of 2, in power lines of 3, and magnetic highway in power lines of 4 and track location. Okay, very, very powerful stuff. All right. So again, the team in position and settings and track locations at MI6, MI9, and MI12 will no longer be in position of gain modulation. They'll be in their projection of their own system. Okay. So getting lines of setting is understanding how to see your film strip of designing your own set correlation. It's all lines of data files. Let's get a process lines of Merkaba, tesseract tetrahedron, basic ground communications, right? Correlate lines of diamond core, right? Center core lines, cross line signals. Now you're working with lines of 3 lines of provision now through a clocking system and travel, okay? So clocking system of 0, 1 sets position, clocking system of 12 sets position, clocking system of 26 set position. This is where you come into your own configuration lines, your own binary, of your own processing, of your own programmers and programming systems, and all track locations. Set correlation lines of 13,000 line screen and direct signal. Clock location setting and travel lines into 12 million line tractions. Getting direct line signals and modification lines of past track lines and high center interference. So you're no longer dealing with the past, present, and future. The center core system is the existence of platforms in track location line settings of the ground setting that shifts the anomalies in line rotation surface and track location. Okay? All right. It's very complicated, isn't it, through clocking, right? This is where you have to truly understand how basically you become your own programmers. So let's go into 21 volume, 59 settings, and we'll go into 21 shift into 6 lines of calculation. There's no clocking here, is there? Right? Right? So if there's no clocking, that means that all lines of communication is coming into balance, right? That's the film strip, the design in you and current events that you will see in your future adaptation lines of 1, 2, and 3 track locations. Set lines of 1, 2, and 3 platforms. Set correlation lines of 3-hour tractions. 3-hour settings, right? Set position lines into 120,000 seconds per frame. Okay, so it's 15 millimeters of a frame, or 15 correlation lines of frame, or 15 seconds lines millimeter of frame. It's all track location lines to its set correlation setting to its ramification setting to travel, and correlation setting to wrong. Calculation lines to high center interference and all calculate, modify, and track location of the system. Ramification lines of operation lines of its mind. Operate the cycle correlation setting at 24 lines of platform, 48 and a 72 and a 144 track location. Platforms of D lines, DX lines of communications processing. Process lines of center, process line calculation setting, and position location to a system. But your foundation is always going to be line calculation setting, starting off with 244 tractions. Units will be in 200 lines of calculation system, and position lines of track location line calculation setting. But now you can go through cross-line signals, downshift line communication system, and you go to 144 platform. But if you go below that, you're in 72 line calculations, 48 frame, it's line calculation setting of a 24 calculation of a 12 clocking system. Anything below that, you can't go below 10,000 deck. You know, we're already in lines that communicate through the system. You have to stay above line communication setting. So the mind is now set up into the game modulations of you, not the program game that you put yourself in. It's through creation. All right. Very, very powerful stuff now. Instructions. All right. So it's really understanding the film strips of you, of what you can do through expansion, right? Okay. So getting into that position location of its platforms gets you all levels of balance. Okay, how you see yourself and your own self. But see, the thing is, guys, this is what it is. The realism now is the film strip of you that you have to keep calm now and cool and collected, right? So collected is the collective you. Now, this is the process that everybody is trying to say. What is the collective? What is this? What is that? The actual collective is the real modulation of you, which is a film strip So it's kind of like you're looking at the film strip of you now, right? Oh, I got to go back and position, cut that, replace that, snip it, and rotate it. System. So it's better to understand the film strip, how it's set up, right? The brightness set location of the sun and the brightness set locations to its moon. So it's a profile line calculation setting that you see through an open window. So you're seeing current events that's happening in chronological order of you every single time you get up. And you have to be very careful that you stay in observation until you understand intent. You can't change things. It's kind of like if I look at something and I don't see the film strip, I don't pick it up because it's exactly what's going to happen in real time. You're coming to current events of you of NEWS, okay? Getting that lines of communication setting puts all levels of process, right? All lines of all line rotation surface. Now your body is coming out the lines of core track interference. You're centering line your settings in position of 2 factors over 1 cycle. What is the flux capacitor? There's 2 lines. You see how it's come together? You have 2 lines of correlation into 1. See? 2 lines into 1. That's what you're coming into. You're coming out of 2. You're coming into the center core system in a 3-track line division location cycles of 1. Process lines of grounds. Set correlation lines in line rotation surface and track location lines of calculation. Okay? So this is where you come into the center operation of setting of nothing in a rotation of currents events that's going to happen to you in the future. That my question? All right, so now you understand the flux. See my hand? See the lights? See the tractions? See direct signals? So what I did here, you see my hand. See the points? See? That's the balance. Getting balance with you is the current events of you in real-time management that puts all lines of correlation setting travel. So 3 points lines of graphs in set position of 3 settings. Flux capacitor here. Oh, angle point lines of divot. Correlates line 1 point, 1, 2, and 3 graph location, right? Travel position. So whatever you do affects everything in your film strip in real time. That's going to happen in current events. So if you understand that position, then you understand the platforms are here, here, and 3 tractions, or locations in the opposite cycle and line rotation surface. Getting lines of communication lines of grounds in platforms line expansion line screen adaptation lines of surface in core track location of visions and calculation. Okay? So it's really interesting. I'll do it again so you understand what you're doing now in your geological, geographical, geometrics, in your location setting, your general setting, right? General setting, the line conditions of agenda, line conditions setting of self into modulation of gain equals self, okay? Set calculation lines into general setting, geological, geographical, and geometric, okay? That's the test in platform communications, right? Understand the general, the geological, geographical, and geometric system, okay? All through plateaus, a film strip that comes to you in chronological order in real time, okay? Process lines of 1, process lines of 2, process lines of 3, process lines of 4, 5, 6, and 8 track location. I've done my equation, see? See it? It's amazing, isn't it? Right? So you're going to see your film strips like this now in all different lines of shapes. Okay, a film strip is not a line signal, but you're in position of the past, present, and future in a 3-point lines of graph. The units are now in 1-point lines of graph. In one center, they have to get in position location tractions and have to use their 12 cycles and understand their nebulas. Nebula lines of core track interference are clock line communication lines of 12 cycles. Setting lines of communication, setting outline calculation, setting the travels and direct signals. Puts in modification system of travel, right? The center core system and travel communication lines of high center interference puts lines of 24 lines of center and travel and communication setting in lines of course and track location to its system. Say correlation of high center interference into all calculated lines. 24 equals lines of 48 equals lines of 72. See what you can do through your clocking system? Or you can add up 24 lines of 0 line in position of 0, 1 in traction, direct lines of signals into 0, 2 in traction, or direct lines modification lines of arrow indicate lines of 0.3s of traction, or direct lines of modification lines of 24 equals lines equal lines of 0, lines of 0, 0, 3 lines of 3 set correlations and traction. All through direct line settings, in all lines of communication setting, a process communication lines into all calculation setting of past, present, and future in position. Track communication lines of 1, 2, and 3 settings in a 4-track location provision. Cycle line high correlation lines of data in a 3-line rotation surface. Direct lines of modification, one center, one surface, one traction, one division, one calculation setting, and one nothingness and traction. Very powerful stuff in location setting and clockings, right? So this is what you guys have to understand. Your current events is already set up, but what you have to understand, you can't change that. So what's happening now is what's already happening, which has already happened. But the process of position locations, what you can do, you can change things in chronological order. But the thing is, you have to see your film strip and be calm, cool, and collected. Calm the mind, calm the soul, quiet the system and travels and point lines of graphs and know exactly what's coming into your film strips in chronological lines of its current events and travel. Film strips and lines of panels in line screen line adaptation, right? So you got provision lines of data coming into an open sequence lines of communication, right? Getting quarter lines to track lines in one signal, 2 panels, and 3 track location. Direct lines in one line center line rotation surface and line communication setting on line calculation setting to its primary circuits and travel. See? Primary line communication to a system, right? Sets core track interference. Now, understanding how to use the letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols is also the same thing. So in that position, let's go through 2. That's 2, right? So in lines and position locations and in position location, this is where the team is now at in track locations. Setting provision lines of cycle, generate the communication lines out track location lines in 3 lines of cycles and generation screen. So you have to understand how to use the platforms net higher lines of acceleration lines of the mind. Process lines of expansion comes into the center core system in a 4-track location lines of 3 cycles. Platforms setting lines across location crossing signals and line conditions of platforms that puts all communication system in travel. Direct lines of modification location grid and travel communication to all of in position. Synchronize these lines correlates and setting of platforms over crossing signal, over crossing line dimensions, and set lines of calculation setting in real-time correlation. Okay? So there's so many ways of looking at this, but the one thing that you have to understand, your positioning, your agenda is now coming in at future settings. So you see things ahead of schedule in a 4-box frame, okay, in a film strip design that's in set correlation setting, but no longer in the gain modulation. Now it's in real time, right? Setting calculation lines is center core system. All right, point lines of graphs indicate correlation lines of point line calculation setting. This is the water and travel to your compass, right? Direct lines of course center interference from north, east, and west and south, right? Correlates as high center interference in E and line position location of news, right? Correlation lines of data formation lines in 1 cycle, 1 center, 1 surface, 1 traction, 1 division. Okay. Now that gets calculated lines in T reception lines in a 4-box frame and a 3-core lines of platforms as that location your geotheriums and track location. Getting lines of calculation lines of ground centers of 1 in position of 2 in position of 3 settings. Process lines of 1, process lines of 2, process lines of 3, and track location. Right? So this is the current event that's going to happen in your film strip. That's film strip up close. Right? So you see that lines of core track interference, and then you just continue on the path, you stay in observation, and it goes to the next film strip of set design. Okay? Cross line connection setting. Here's the film strip that comes in. Here's another film strip that comes in setting. Right? Cross line calculates line. So everything you see through film strip cancels out in a 4-box frame, which is an Xbox line screen. That direct line's high center interference. So it sets lines of communications. If you want to go back in your film strip position locations, you have to learn and understand how to edit the cycle. Set core lines of time edit, time sequence, time position, time capacitor, time console core lines of default. Sets lines of communication lines in film strip that set design line location of your system into line settings of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 set correlation set interactions. All right, so modification lines of 1 and 2 panels, process lines of 3 and 4 panels, track calculation lines, cross line signals, and line position location of the system, process line calculation line signals, and process line calculation setting, or line communication lines of center communication, of split lines of anomaly, and 3-graph communication. Direct lines of signals, cross lines of 1 and 2 panels of track location, direct lines of platform, and 0 correlation lines of platform, inline rotation surface, and track location. Okay? So symbols on 1 frame, 2 frames, and 3 frames. Film strip of design. So cancels out in line setting, right? Sets communication lines of grounds, 1, 3, and 6, and 8 track location, right? Very complicated stuff, guys. So what you're going to see now is the film strip of view of the angina that's going to be in chronological order in 1, 2, and 3, and 4 in 5-hour and track location, right? So it's 5 hours, core track and film strip, correlates line of the sun in position of the moon and the lines of projection. Okay? So projection is 1, 2, 3, and 4 settings. Okay? Process calculates lines, energetic lines into infinity 8 rotation, surface, and traction. Okay? And direct signals. Right? So everybody get confused? Yes. But let's just get into basic grounds and really understand how they're set up in your film strip and position locations, how it comes into modification lines, all track locations to a system and travel. Okay? Very complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun, right? See, the thing is, this is baby steps, okay, for the team now, because they're coming out of the 144 platform. Anything above 144, you're in your own film strip of you now, through your own project of your own agenda that's coming into future events. And you have to be very, very careful how you see those film strips. And you can open up and you can see more through a window frame. Okay, in position. You're here. This is you. That's you, right? So you're looking at the film strip right here, right? 1, 2, 3. That's in order. So you're going to see it in this 1 hour, this in 6 hours, and this in 8 hours. And that position lines high correlation setting to 1, 2, 3, 4, and position lines of traction. Because remember, it's the 7 lines. 4 equals lines of 3. Okay, equals lines of film projector of 8. Okay. Sets lines of levels, lines, ground levels, lines of 1, and equal lines of core track interference, and line direct signals, and arrow indicates lines of 4 track divisions, past, present, and future, and track location. Center core system, electrical line connection settings of panels of platforms 1, 2, 3, and 6 location setting, right? So this is where you come into all lines of communication, how you come in position line track lines, how 1 times 1 equals 3. Okay, because the thing is, to understand the processing of you, you have to understand the current events of you. So you hold on to that, but you don't do anything about it because it's already set up, right? You don't want to change that because now you're seeing the future of you now. So when you see the future of you, your whole body, your vessel is going to feel it from head to toe. Okay, setting ground lines and core track interference. So you know exactly how you set up line position 24 line cycle into 120,000 frame per second. Per second, team. That's insane. Okay, that's per second, okay, in position of travels. So you start off with 24 platforms. Let's start with that, 24 platforms, right? So that's lines of 24 into 244, 344, 444, and 544. The travel, right? Direct lines and highways and line rotation surface. Now the X2000 comes in, they dock their 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 set correlations of traction. Direct lines modification lines of high core track interference takes the seconds lines into minutes and hours in line communication setting and processing. Processing calculates lines high interference into unresolved location system. This calculates lines and assignments, track case lines of application, set core lines of balance, set correlation lines of execute, line position location run system, and travel point lines of graph communication. So once you understand that, then you understand 120,000 line signals puts all communications to its system. So 120 equals lines at 244. And you go lines at high interference, 244. Over lines is calculates lines, so you're now over pi. So 244 becomes 344, 444, 544, 644. So now you're seeing faster occurring events of you or what's going to happen faster. So you have to go faster to be slower. Go slower, you see faster. So what that is position locations. Once you get out of the 144, everything starts to slow down, and then you actually see the film strip in slow motion. Right? And then when you understand that, then you let that go and it just continues on in its path in position of its current events. That puts all levels of you in your position, location, your performance. That's all lines of communication and lines of pi in generation. Okay? All right, center communications high center interference. You can add a flux lines and current lines of deprecation setting your finger points. Core track interference of 1.0. Calculate modify into all cycles. That's 1.0, right? Then you go into 1.5, and then you go into all position location settings, 1.55, and then you get into position of 2 and 0, 0 correlation lines of track center interference. So that's a 2 clocking system of 0, 0, and correlation lines of 3 platforms. Direct lines in 1 minute, 5 centers, and 5 rotation surface and track location. Direct lines and calculation of the lines of 1 cycle, 1.5 provision lines of cycle. Sets lines of 1 cycle and 0 correlation lines of 2 platforms. Sets lines communication lines of digital frame, digital clock, digital correlation, and digital line communication lines of track location. So it's all about your fingers now, guys. Your fingers are going faster in tractions and direct signals. So again, 1.0, 1.5, 1.55, and position of 2 in track location, right? Finger points of 1, 2, 3, and 4 platforms and tractions. Direct lines of 1, 1, and position of 1 and 3 track location revision. Line condition setting, split lines anomaly into 4 track revision lines and calculation setting to a primer. So your primer gets bigger and bigger and bigger over time, a measure that scales communication lines of balance and track location. Okay? So it's important to understand these things, how you come into line setting. So you can see your film strip faster if you get out of the 244 platform. Now you're in 444. You're skipping lines of anomaly. You're adding lines of 1.5, okay, and position of 2, okay, 2 lines of calculation lines. So you're in slow motion. Slow motion equals lines of 1x, okay, in 3 setting in track location, right? So your film strip splits lines anomaly and rotation graphs and communication line system to its inventory to its calculation, right? So it's very powerful. Once you understand more levels of your body and mechanism line calculated lines neutralize the core track interference in a point lines of graph, in a 4-line provision, in track location of past, present, and future, in a 4 communication setting, and rotation system, in a 4 graph communication lines, in a line setting of 7, 7, 7, and 7 track location. Okay? So all it is, the team now is just coming to expansion of their own lines, of their own current events that's going to happen to them in future events. So this is about understanding how you can speed up the film strip, how you can slow down the film strip, how you can pause the film strip and position, okay? Fast forward or rewind, right? But you got to be very careful because it's already set for your system and future adaptation. That track calculation line screens. So we're taking out the 2030, okay, Eagles lines, you get tomorrow line signals. The team sequence is going to be 2050 now in track location, right? That plat is the lines of 4 line rotations and 2 track locations, 0 operation of 3 cycles, 0 correlations to high interference, 5 track division lines of 2 cycles, 0 correlation lines of 2 panels, and a 3 split line of anomaly. Setting lines of communicating lines of platforms 1, center lines of center core system and travel. Okay, very powerful stuff, right? Direct lines of flux, center core system in 1 center, split lines through into all lines of new correlation setting and track lines of a flux capacitor. So it's like a Petri dish. It's like 4 line position of 5 settings in platforms of 1 and positional platforms of 2 and track location. Okay? So now coming into Earth line perception, this is how it sets lines of course. This is your Earth. Okay? Now, track location lines of direct signals, platform lines of time zones, 3 track location lines of country communications. So correlation lines of 1, platforms of 2, 3, and 4 settings, right? So there's a platform of 4 track location system, right? Then we come into this line calculation setting, right? What is that? Time, right? Timing clocks, ends of time, clocks in the line communication lines of time sequence, crosses lines of 1 and position of 2, right? Now the center core system of the XT1000 is going to be above the signal, right? 6 a.m. platform lines of 1 cycle, 1 strip down and position lines of travel. Direct lines of signals, graph calculation lines of 3 graph communication lines of points, in line calculation setting and travel in point lines of graph communication lines of data files and track location. Direct lines of signals, process lines of 1, process lines of 2 and 3 travels and rotation. Travel lines of 1 in position of 2 and 3 lines of travel locations. Direct lines of setting, circle lines of 1, circle lines of 2, circle lines of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 second correlations and interactions. All done through equation, right? That's how it's going to be set up, right? So your platform expansion is knowing how to change the geometrical lines or location of line calculation and clocking of your platforms, and understanding how to get out line communication system, how you can fast forward your current events now. But you got to be careful not to take anything out of sync. If you have a film strip line setting, okay, and you're getting up and it's 3 a.m., and now you see a film strip of you in position, it's 3 a.m., okay, 3 a.m. line correlation setting to travels, right? Check lines, communication lines of 3 cycles, equal location lines of ozone, core lines into hemisphere, okay? You set correlation lines of tractions. That comes in 1 frame, 1 track setting, but it allocates position of time frames of 2 lines into 120,000 seconds per frame and track location. Now, directing lines of modification lines calculates the landing strip, line signals, and one cross location. Direct lines of panels, cross lines of level, and track locations to a plane. Process lines are energetic line, screen line, adaptation lines of surface. Sets core track interference, and line calculation lines are rainbow graph correlation lines of expansion. Direct lines of signals, modification lines into location grid, and travel communication. Direct lines, cross line signals, and line position location of balance. Okay? Very, very complicated stuff. Through the geometrics, through the geological, and to all communication setting to its geographical system. Okay? All through traction. Right? The complicated it gets, the more easier it formats its settings. But you have to really understand the metric lines and screen lines, adaptation lines, because now you're in a 7 platform in position of box frames or triangulation split lines of anomaly and 3 platforms of communications. But now you're dealing with the past, present, and future in setting calculations. So coming in 3 platforms and travel. Okay? So it's all about changing this box. Okay, so how we change this box is how we change the correlation lines of tractions of time. But there's always a platform that you're in position of in traction, right? You're in platform 1 in position of 3, okay? 3 comes into 7 over 1 over cycle over center over calculation line and setting. Process calculation lines is a graph calculation lines, a high center interference. Direct lines into data screen lines of location setting to a Merkaba. You are in the center operational lines and direct signal in position location in your system all through current events. Okay? Current event lines of data formation. It's getting complicated now, guys. Data formation lines, window frame. This is the window frame that you see in line communication lines at 3M that's going to happen to you in current event communication to its agenda. Right there. Boom. Okay? So that crosses out, crosses lines into 3 track location lines, and it continues on in line screen. Direct calculus lines, graph lines of 1, 2, 3, and 4 platform communications. Zip, zap, and zoom, X2000 comes in, platforms, docking system, and travel lines of 7. Process calculated lines of platforms 1, 2, 6, 8, and 12 set correlation lines of traction. Direct lines of signals, platforms line, cross line signals, and platforms communication lines, high center interference of A, in position of B, and C track location. Set lines on lines of DX, lines of 1, in platforms of 1 setting, crosses line correlation setting, triangulation lines of communication. Process line direct signals into window frame correlates the lines of 4 over 3 in track location lines as snowy graph and a 3-line rotation surface in traction. Very complicated stuff, isn't it? Right? Come into your own self now. A modification of self mode. Right? Self mode. So out of line communication settings. Say goodbye to remote, team. Bye-bye, remote. So woo! Are we having fun yet, guys? Oh my gosh, I'm telling you, it's crazy. All right. So getting in that position, you come in this track calculations. Understanding the line calculation, metric line screens, indirect signals into modified lines to a release cube. Process calculation line screen adaptations and process calculation lines on 4 set correlations. Direct locations of platforms setting A, B, C, D, E lines, center lines of 1 track location. Done by equation, right? So you're speeding up your anomalies, you're coming out of the game mode and you come into self mode now. So 6 a.m., no more remote. Just current event is going to come to you in a 24 cycle in a 3-line provision and 120,000 line per frame per second, 1,000 lines of seconds in the 3-track provision, 2 lines of cycles in 1 center. Okay? You're afraid to ask? Let's see, locations on the correlations to name travels. What is your handler? Okay? What is your color number? Okay? There's got to be lines, single lines of balance and track after these lines before you come in my position to my school. Can please identify yourself? Okay? What is your color? What is your number? Make sure you have a direct line signal location in your systems. 3-track provision lines of 3 cycles. 2-line position off correlation lines of track interference. And cases of 1 system and 1-line rotation surface interaction. Okay? Yeah, no, I need to know what's your color number. You have to have a handler when everybody comes in that identifies your system. Okay? Okay, it's important you guys understand what's going on through track location, your settings, through current events, and line strip location system and travel. Okay? All right, so we take the 3 current events and 3 lines of communications, right? Now, you're the process lines of platforms of 3 lines of 2 over 1 track location lines of provision that center core system and lines of you. This is the mechanism lines of calculations to your system, right? Process calculation lines are 3 track location lines of provision lines of platforms 2 in position of 1 and 0 track location. Okay? So you have to identify yourself. Thank you very much, Blue 7. You're overlining your signals. So we're going to put you back in perception screen. There you go. All right, direct lines of signal is a modification lines of cycle. Now, getting that lines of highest interference puts everything in balance of communication system. So let me say this again. The team line settings, MI6, okay, 9 and 12 equals lines, no inline calculation setting travels of remote. You come in out remote. No more remote, okay? MI6, 9, and 12. 3 lines still stays in position of the game line screen, but they upright their line screens come into their line correlation setting of travels. Now, direct lines of film strip is line cross line signals and lines of panels in your highways and track location. Direct calculus lines and a 245 line split lines of anomaly and line rotations. This work gets a number sequence and a 4 track location lines highest interference of travel. Set core lines of 2 crosses line signals on 2 track location. Direct calculus lines of 4 line split lines of 3 line rotation surface. Set core lines of 2 over cross lines of 2 track location. Direct lines modification lines of 4 line rotation surface interactions. Direct lines at high line centers of 24 line position location system at all levels of calculus lines and data formation lines adaptation. Okay. All right. Get any communication to higher line settings in your system location in your agenda. Force lines is calculation screen lines adaptation of surface. But it's all communication in your system and all lines of calculation line screens. Yes. Questions and answers after class. All right. So direct lines of signals. They get line calculation lines of 0 in position on 12 cycles. All right. Setting lines of track lines and directs. Setting lines communication lines of 2 track location lines and indirect. Core line high interference. You have to really understand the process outcomes in lines of circles in rotation setting. Process lines in 1 cycle, 1 system, 1 travel, 1 rotation. Travel point lines of graph, 1 indicates lines of platforms and track location. Direct lines of power, line candidates in setting half byte, 6 lines anomaly, rotates the system in a 12 line communication setting of a particle accelerator that goes around line correlation setting in core track interference in direct lines of panel in line rotation surface in its nothingness line communications come back in center of yin and yang of process communication lines infinity 8 and travel. That my equation. Okay. That's what the team has to come into. Okay. Center calculated line, you come into line calculations and set into your Votronics. Directing lines of signals is all about understanding how to use a 52 line wave. Set track lines in a position on a 40 line cycle. See, I'm taking the time frame and changing line communication with measure, correlating my processing system of my programs. 19 lines of volume into 8 channels of rotation. Okay, so process lines of 5, sets lines of position lines of 5 platforms, set core track lines of 4 settings and travel. 4 indicates lines of 1, 1 equals lines of 5, equals lines of 6 in travel communication. Now platforms of 1 in position XT1000 comes in 3 lines of perimeters and parameters, directing docking, and 3 track location, right? Now, it's all about understanding how to coordinate the system and travel. Setting lines of communication lines in 19 box frames in position of 8 box frames into 48 line rotations, equal lines of highest interference and travel endpoint lines of graph, center core system, 1 setting, 1 surface, 1 track location. Okay? Everything that you create is schematics now. You guys understand your gain modulation system. Now you do it through outlines of calculation setting through current events, right? So you break it down in position and you start small. Okay? You start small. You change things small, but you don't change your film strip, okay? Because it's in time locked sequence now. So you see more future of you coming in your position. So it's kind of like I'm here in position in track location settings, right? You're there, right? And then 4 hours, you know exactly where you're going to be in track location. So your film strip is just in chronological order. You can speed it up, but to speed it up, you have to go faster so you can slow it down so you can actually see the film strips that's set up in your track location lines of provision. Okay? So it's really interesting when you get to higher calculation lines, the screen lines adaptation. Okay? So I'm just showing you exactly where it all comes from in balance and track location. Okay? So you get a lot more understanding how this all works in platforms and how you use it in all communication, right? So I'm just getting you guys to understand how to use your schematics, how to use your powers, your direct signals, and all modification lines and center calculation screen lines. So it gets all calculated modified in all line communication system. So it changes all lines of high center correlation setting travels. So let's get in direct line signal. Okay, you're here, right? And you're going through an image. You see something, try to understand what it is. It's chronological order. I'm good to go. I'm in my own self mode now, right? So I'm no longer in a game modulation playing the game. You're not playing the game. You are the game. That's the difference. You're not playing the game. You are the game now. So that puts all lines of performance and the different lines and efficacy location to a system that puts all track location your settings and balance communicates the system and understand your settings that your film chip is coming past, present, and future all at once. That's current event. That's how you come into the future line calculation setting to your modification system and how you see things in frame now in track locations. Starting off in line calculation setting in position location at 244, platitude line location setting at 120,000 frames per second per square per root. Now the box frames are triangulation frame and position locations, right? Direct lines of signals that put you into modifications to your agenda through your NEWS. That's what you're coming into now. Okay? So really be cautious of what you see through a film strip now because you're seeing in chronological order. So it's like I'm here in position. Oh, okay, that's where I'm going to be. So the image comes to you. It's coming to you now, right? And you're seeing in frame. So you can speed it up, slow it down, or you can just freeze it for a second, but then you can't stop it. It's got to have a continuous flow, right? But you're seeing it chronological order. So there's no confusion lines to your mapping sequence, right? So that's where it comes real. So you can't really change the film chip. All you can change is everything around the system. You can't change anything of the center system because the past, the present, and future is now in one cycle, in line rotation cycle, and generation screen lines adaptation system. So after tomorrow, on track calculation lines, adapt these lines of highest interference, the team's going to come to all lines of communications out of remote. Out of remote. You no longer be in the game modulation. You be the self mode of yourself, okay? So getting in that communication system, all right, I'm going to see myself in 3 days. That's where I'm going to be. I'm going to be in the mountains. Okay, so you're 3 days ahead, right? If you get confused, you're 2 days ahead, right? So 2 days ahead is 2 days behind, right? So you have to be very careful that you don't take things out of order now, right? So it's all line specific. The specifications is already set in your system, right? But you can change the outline of communications, right? Working with that cycle. Start off small with your abundance and through your manifestation systems, right? But you can't change what's already set for you because it's real. And everything you change, it changes everything else and changes everything else of everyone else. Okay? That's why it's so powerful. So it's all lines of how you use it through information, line calculation setting, your intels and your data files, and line rotation cycle. If we get a regeneration lines of spin cycle that retracts position lines of calculations, this is how it tracks the calculation line system. Okay? Direct lines of panels, one cycle, one correlation track location to a system, right? You're standing here. Okay, so this is how you basically see things in travel. But you won't be in remote now. So you're going to be traveling like this, okay, 3 cycles, and then you're going to see lines of data coming in, process, different lines of calculation, different areas in rotation surface and chronological order, right? Files come in line calculation setting in process communications, right? So crosses lines of 1 in position of 2 and 3 set correlation lines of tractions, right? Then once you understand that, it pattern lines its divisions to its location setting to an overhead that goes lines of over pi. Data file 1, 2, 3, locked in signal. Okay, process lines of 1 line in rotations and 3 triangulating lines that case split lines of anomaly. Data formation lines and more data comes in line rotation as you're still traveling in your current events in real travels in rotation surface and traction. The data formation line screen lines adaptation sets up a half pipe and a data formation line directs signals into modification lines of center, correlation center, and calculation. That's how it comes in now with the team after tomorrow, right? So it's complicated, isn't it? Right? So that's why you have to send the platforms of where you are and track case lines of high center interference and line rotation to its calculation. Okay, or you cross-referencing signals, guys. This is cross-referencing signals. Okay, so you're expanding your system of your energetic line screen. Your direction is now expanding into the mind settings of data and files in your current events of your film strips. So the data files are now film strips that's set up for you in set correlations where you're going to be in track location. Okay, easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? And it's all processing you through your Merkaba test rig and your travels in-line communication system of your platforms and track location. Ooh-ah. Okay, very, very powerful stuff, guys. Okay, that's it. But I just want to show you what we're all coming into as our settings now. We're coming into our own processing system through our CPU units in a high-line setting location setting to the general settings, the geological, geographical, and geometric system. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and 4 platforms. 5 chords, track lines, and where you left off in line rotations into 12. Coming to line calculating lines of a 13 and a 4-track revision of cycles and line condition setting to the mind system. Okay? So, all right. See you in 5.